to the final round of the F1 Irish Collegiate Series. I am, of course, Gib, who you have seen many, many times over here on the Irish Esports Collegiate Winter Series F1. And we are bringing you the F1 this evening. Yas Marina, Abu Dhabi. So definitely one to look out for. Now, I am on my own again this weekend, or this evening, so I apologize. You're going to have to deal with me talking a lot and not anybody else to kind of join me. But, you know, definitely an exciting one to get us, finish us off this evening for our competition. Now, of course, if we have a quick look at the standings, if I can bring that up, we have a quick look at the standings over here. We have a couple races ago, our champion was decided. Speeder kind of off in the clear, no catching him now. That was about 2 races ago he did that. 2 or 3 races, he kind of secured that championship position for himself. But do not fret, there is still prizes up for grabs this evening. Prizes for 2nd and 3rd place, as well as being the champion. So Speeder is our 2nd champion. Or is champion 2 times in a row. Apologies, I seem to have joined as a racer rather than as a spectator, so hold on with me just a minute. Here we go. We are starting off the qualifying here pretty soon. Let me just bring this up for you and we will be set to go. So definitely an exciting race to come for you this evening. Here we see, who's this coming out? This is Nico coming out of the pits, ready to get a bit of heat into those tires, get the ball rolling for himself this evening. Gonna be a good one for sure. Apologies, I'm a little rusty. I usually do 2 stints in the week, but I obviously, with the grand finals coming up at LAN starting tomorrow, there was no Rocket League on Tuesday. There was nothing this week until this evening. And last week we didn't have F1 either, so a little bit rusty, so you'll have to bear with me as I get back into the groove of commentating, casting for you all this evening. So here we are with Nico trying to get a bit of heat into those tires for this track coming up for this qualifying. Now, let's have a little chat about the track itself. We're in Abu Dhabi, so track temperatures are definitely going to play a part in the degradation of tires throughout this race, but going to be interesting to see how tire strategies come out. In terms of overtaking, well, there are a couple areas on this track where overtaking is a possibility. I'm predicting turn 5 just before that DRS straight is going to be a good overtaking opportunity. Of course, turn 1 is always always has plenty of action going for itself on any track, you know, especially on lap 1. As soon as the lights go out, people are trying to gain those positions as quickly as possible. So we're gonna keep on with Nico here as they go for their flying lap, trying to get a little bit of time down for themselves and trying to maybe hold on to that position of try and get a pole position. Sorry, a little bit frazzled brain this evening. Apologies for that. So here with Nico, and then we see a caution on sector 3, possibly if we skip down to, is it potentially obituary battle? Potentially. Back to Nico, who's coming down to the last couple of corners here, and apologies. coming down to that kind of final chicane there before coming up to those last few turns. Nico with a 124. There we go. That is the time for the rest of the drivers this evening to beat, to gain themselves that pole position and put themselves in an advantageous position going forward. Bearing in mind that currently in second place is Ella or Eilish with looking like 90-something points there. I can't quite read it on my small monitor. Freedom is not in the lobby today, so sitting with 77 points under his belt, could potentially be losing third place for himself, where he is currently sat in the overall standings. But here we are going to change. Who will we change over to? Let's have Ella, our current P2 in the overall standings, going to be trying to put down some serious speed on this track. What have they got there on the... Let me bring up the tire. Putting down a time on the wet. Speeder as well with a 128. Ella a second behind. Trying to, as we've seen this tactic a couple times throughout this series of going out on those wets, putting down a bit of a, a safety net for themselves in that, having something to fall back on in case they don't get an optimal time on those softs. But here we see a little bit of wobbling from Ella, trying to potentially get more heat into those wets, or potentially, who's that is just overtaken them? It is Speeder. So looks like they're having a little bit of fun out on track. The last soiree of the series. Definitely a little bit of debris came off somebody's car there as well, so might have to be worried about that. But they don't look too worried. They're having fun out on track. That's what you love to see, is when it gets to a point like this. Oh, Speeder having a little bit of a spin as well. You love to see it. It comes to the end of the series. They're having fun. There's no hard feelings between racers whatsoever, and they're just here to enjoy themselves for the final round in Abu Dhabi as Ella spins out on camera. Ella has made a habit of that had a habit of doing that in our first round. Had an unfortunate incident for themselves, missing the pit lane, going for donuts. Beautiful. And yeah, that caution was just Ella having a bit of fun there. So everybody's gone back into the pits now for the time being. Going to be possibly changing up those tires, getting themselves an actual lap time for the likes of Speeder and Ella. Possibly trying to just put a little bit of rubber on track using those wets. Get, as I said, that kind of safety net before going out on a set of softs to get themselves a more competitive time. That being said, a 128 and a 129, nothing to scoff at on this track, bearing in mind that I'm pretty sure it's Lewis Hamilton has the track record for this Yas Marina track in Abu Dhabi with a 139 coming in 2018. So 2019, apologies. So definitely nothing to scoff at, that is for sure. Who is going to come out of the pits first for a second run? Obituary and Minikai still needing to put time on the board to potentially secure themselves a higher position on the starting grid. Apologies, I cannot find the setting where it doesn't tab me out. Oh, it's looking like we are wanting to reset the lobby here. just a little bit of a technical difficulty, looking like people are wanting to reset the lobby to, for some reason I can't seem to figure out why just at this moment in time, but it's looking like there is an issue in the race setup, so going to quickly restart the lobby and we will be back to you in just a moment. Alrighty, folks, the lobby is done there. Let us just wait for the lobby to reset itself. Apologies for this. I know that you're excited to get the final round of the Irish Esports Winter Collegiate Irish Esports Collegiate Winter Series. Apologies, underway, but looking like we're going to have to restart the lobby and get that qualifying session going again. So we're back in the lobby now. Going to get this show back on the road, and we are going to spectate rather than in the race ourselves, like I mistakenly did in the last lobby. So, exciting things to come, that's for sure. I don't have an intermission screen to throw to, which is an oversight on my part, definitely. I have one for Rocket League, but not for F1, so we're just going to sit and wait until this lobby starts going again. Is my mic on? There we go. Into the lobby we go. Apologies. I think I was just nattering away to the poor drivers having to listen to me, and of course you viewers having to listen to me as well. Apologies for that. I'm sure your ears are burning, but nonetheless, here we go back into the lobby to start off qualifying once again, each driver trying their best to get that pole position from the get-go, giving themselves that little bit more of an advantage over their opponents. Now, we have seen Speeder take an interesting tactic throughout this series. We have seen him go for that kind of try and get himself that last position on the grid, but to challenge himself to work his way back up to the front of the pack to score those 25 points. And usually throughout this series has been gaining 26 points, getting the fastest lap as well as he likes to do. But we've seen other racers come out and challenge him towards the end of the race to try and get that extra point for themselves. Here we see Nico going for their outlap. Once again, starting with Nico, getting a little bit of temperature into those tires, trying to get them up to optimal operating temperatures so that they can have the best opportunity for setting the fastest lap to get themselves that pole position. And we see also on the grid coming out of the pits, Ella with the wets, going for the same strategy, putting a little bit of rubber on the track before going out on the softs for that actual qualifying lap, getting that safety net for themselves, but still trying to get a little bit more rubber out on that track. And Speeder is going for the same tactic, it looks like. But let's stick with Nico, as they are the first out, and they will be the first, hopefully, for their sake, will be the first to set themselves a lap time. Oh, a little bit of debris coming off there. Don't know if that was from the car or something on the side of the track. But that, if it's from the car, it'll definitely affect their lap times. Some of these corners, there is a turn on this track. If I quickly pull it up. Excuse me, sorry viewers. It's around turn 6, turn 7. There is a curb that, if you're not careful, can really throw you off. It's a very slippy curb, so drivers need to be careful about potentially cutting that a little too finely and sliding out from, having their car slide out from underneath them. Going to definitely be something could potentially crop up and catch these racers off guard. Here we sit with Nico on their flying lap, coming around. I have not been keeping track about which turn they are or which sector they're in, but definitely keeping. Here we bring up the lap. Okay, sector 3, there we go. The lap times there. So definitely going very fast. A little bit of stuttering. I think that might be a lobby connection issue on my end. But there, a 125 for Nico. Going to be very happy with that. A little bit slower than the original qualifying time from the original lobby, which was a 124. But definitely looks like they're going to be pushing for an additional lap time. Try and bring that down just that little bit more. Obituary Baton with a 126. That could be huge for them. They have not had the best of runs throughout this championship. They have finished the race in last, I think, 6 out of the 7 overall races we have completed, but still have battled it to the very end to make sure that they secure those points, even if they have come in not in a position they maybe not would have hoped for. But definitely a 126 is a very competitive time at the moment with the current times that are coming out. Let's switch on down to Ella, our P2 in the overall standings, coming down these last couple of turns, heading for the start-finish line. Going to be a 129 on those wets, so, and Speeder is going to go past them with a 128 there on the wets as well. So definitely looking like they have pretty competitive times on those wets, but will sure to be coming into the pits potentially. Maybe not for Speeder. We have seen him go out on those wets and stay out on those wets, but potentially coming into the pits, change out those wets for softs and get themselves those winning lap times. Here we are with Minikai. Definitely a force to be reckoned with. Currently sitting in P4 in the overall standings, so has that potential to take P3 from Freedom if they score enough points this evening, and will, in that case, would be taking themselves home a prize for P3, of course, as there is prizes for first, second, and third throughout this championship. And it's, yeah, Minikai has fought very hard. Minikai actually with a 125, so bring themselves up to P2. I was waffling on about overall standings, and I didn't even notice that they had secured themselves P2 for the time being. But can the other racers reply? Here we are. Let's change over to, no, well, Minikai is the only one staying out. I was going to change over to some of our racers on the wets, but they've all gone into the pits now, so we'll stick with Minikai, who again has proved themselves a formidable opponent throughout this series, has had a lot of wheel-to-wheel battles all across the grid, all across the overall standings grid for sure. Had a great battle with, was it, I think it's Nico, if I remember correctly, last race, which wasn't last week, it was the week before, but definitely had a great battle we saw happen out on track in Qatar. Minikai coming into the pits, and we'll swap over onto Obituary, who's going out for another outlap, trying to secure a better time for themselves out on track. Let's see there, doing a bit of a wiggle, the F1 wiggle, trying to get more heat into those tires, get it up to optimal temperatures for that all-important qualifying lap. And we see Ella has switched to the Inters. Interesting strategy, but who am I to judge? And we see Nico also coming out on an outlap for trying to hold on to that 125 pole position, try and bring that down a little bit, potentially has it within them to bring that down possibly by that 0.3 seconds, get themselves a nice round 125 overall, but trying to hold on to that pole position on the starting grid, give themselves that advantage because they are not too far behind Minikai in the overall standings. They are currently sitting P5, so could potentially grab themselves some more points and put themselves in a better position overall at the end of this championship. Let me see if I can bring up the sector times. No, I cannot. That is just the, all right. Well, can't bring up sector times overall, but we'll sit here with Obituary, who's coming into towards the end of their lap with a 116, so going very fast, carrying a lot of speed through these turns now, coming down towards the start-stop line, and a 125.097, taking that pole position for themselves, dethroning Nico, but Nico also on a flying lap now, just completed Sector 2 into Sector 3, 103 currently, coming down into that little bit of a chicane before coming out and around towards, what is this, turn 15, 14, 15, and 16. Here we go, coming around to that start-finish line. Going to be crossing with a 123.9. Again, dethroning Obituary, who had just taken that pole position. So it seems like they're all vying for that top spot off the starting grid. But who is next? Minikai in that Sector 2 Ella in sector 1 on those inters. We'll go back to Minikai. There's the curb I was talking about. That little chicane on 6 and 7. Coming down this DRS zone. Going to be coming up to that almost... It's not quite a hairpin, but it is definitely getting close to being a hairpin. Turn 9. Going to have to lose a little bit of speed coming out of that to make sure they don't go wide. Can't have that. We don't want to be seeing any more track infringement time penalties dished out. We had seen that last race that everybody bar one had managed to incur a time penalty of some degree. Coming down the track now towards that little final chicane. Oh, apologies. Coming down towards turn 16, going to get themselves a 1:27, so a little bit slower than their current lap time, but potentially going to carry a bit more speed going through these turns and manage to secure themselves a better position on the starting grid. Let's sit with Ella coming down towards where they want to be. They're going to take that position from Speeder on those inters. Speeder's still sitting in the pits on the wets, potentially playing the long game, waiting till everybody else is off the track, swapping to those softs and going for that pole position in the qualifying. But as we know, Speeder likes to challenge himself, give himself that extra bit of work to do, and qualifying at the bottom that he's done that twice now. That being said, he's just swapped over to the softs, so potentially could be a bit of a prediction there of him coming out and smashing those lap times as we've seen him do time and time again. Minikai in sector 3. There's the little chicane I was talking about that I got confused about with turn 16. Now need to keep very close on this turn, carry a lot of speed. Going to be coming down into the pits, so will not have to worry. Must be very happy with that 125. Everybody is very tightly grouped together at the moment. You know, there's about 2 seconds between Obituary and Nico, but then Obituary and Minikai, 0.8 of a second between them, and then another 2 seconds between Minikai and Ella. Now Ella being out on those inters, so definitely not the fastest tire compound, but still probably happy having Speeder behind them on the starting grid, or maybe not happy about having Speeder behind you on the starting grid. He is a formidable force and definitely one I would not like to have bearing down on me, you know, breathing down my neck as we sit with him on an outlap. He's gone for those softs, potentially that idea of him waiting for the track to clear a little bit, get that breathing room for himself to come out on the softs and smash Nico's time, gaining himself pole position. And here we come down to turn 15 and 16, using all of the track to his advantage to carry as much speed down that start straight and into turn 1, where we could potentially be seeing a bit of action on lap 1. Going to be looking to make up those spaces. Who is that behind him? Trying to keep up as well. They're doing a pretty good job of it until that turn 5, but no, still there. That is Nico, it looks like, out on their outlap. They are feeling the pressure of Speeder going out on those softs, trying to bring down that 128 to potentially a 123. You know, they have it in them. Speeder has it in him. We know that he can do it. Apologies. We've seen him do it before, and he is looking pretty fast through that sector 2 there, taking off a bit of time. Now, not hard to beat, bearing in mind that he went out on those wets and had a 128, still, you know, very competitive, especially for wet tires, but definitely going to be pushing for that better lap time. He's currently Oh, he's gone into the pits. Interesting tactic. Obituary still out trying to secure a better lap time than that 1:23. Nico gone for their flying lap on those softs, fresh softs as well. So gonna have a lot more wiggle room in those tires to work with. Carrying a lot of speed through some of these corners. Very impressive. I certainly am not up to snuff with the caliber of these drivers out on track this evening. And who is that chasing them down? It looks like it's Mini Kai. There is Mini Kai trying to improve that lap time once again. Let's sit with Nico, our pole position holder for the time being. And here we go down this DRS zone, coming up to turn 6? No. It's turn 9, apologies. I've skipped a couple of corners there. Turn 9, coming down into this sector 3, down towards this little bit of a chicane before coming up to turns 14, 15, and 16. 16 being our last turn of the race. And into the pits they go. Not a competitive lap time for themselves. Not happy with it. Going to be sitting there. Mini Kai giving themselves a bit of a boost up the grid there, overtaking Obituary. Gonna be happy with that, starting on the second row. That being said, has been demoted to the second row. Cut a corner there, big cut of a corner. Apologies, meant to say the first row, but has now been demoted to the second row. Ella with a 123.9, so has promoted themselves to the front row of the starting grid. Gonna be happy with that. Eventually came out on those softs, had those two backup times. The first one on wets, full wets, and the second on those inters, but has now put down the lap time at 1:23 for themselves, securing second place off that starting grid. Mini Kai will go back with for the time being. Potentially looking to... Oh, Ella has crashed and has retired back to the garage. Has managed to crash in the qualifying. We saw that in round 1. We've seen it again in round 8. We have no idea what happened, but unlucky. Mini Kai coming into the pits now. Again, not happy with that lap time. Had cut a couple of corners on that qualifying lap, but has had a detrimental impact. Potentially could have re-secured themselves that P2 position, but that is it for qualifying. We have Nico in P1, Ella is P2, Mini Kai P3, Obituary P4, and Speeder has again opted to stay at the back of the grid and fight his way up to from P5. So going to be interesting going into this race. It's all to gain. It's all to play for. There we see Ella with a DNF after that crash. So going to be an interesting one. 13 seconds left before we start this race. And before we start this race, I'm going to take a quick moment of your time to thank our wonderful sponsors that make what we do here at Irish Collegiate Esports Winter Series, or just Esports Series in general. Going to take a minute of your time to thank them to make what we do possible. So a big shout out to Reroll, PlayAid, Coca, GG Machines, Stacks, and Dogpatch Labs. Now, if you are going to the LAN tomorrow in Dublin, it is located in Dogpatch Labs in Dublin, so for sure going to see everything they have there as we wait for the race to begin. A big thank you to all of our sponsors that make what we do a possibility. And here we are on the grid, and we are going for the formation lap, and get a little bit of heat into those tires. Make sure that they are ready to go for when those 5 lights are out and the race is on. Again, here we see Nico in front, Ella P2, Minikai P3, Obituary P4, and Speeder P5. Speeder has that ability in him to work his way up through the grid throughout these coming laps. And here we have a little pop-up about possible race strategies. We have seen some interesting race strategies throughout this series. We saw the likes of Freedom, who knew he's very hard on those tires on some of these race tracks, opting to start out on the hards and then going for a medium after the fact. But I will tell you now, everybody is out on the mediums for the first stint, and it's going to be an interesting one. So we've seen a couple 1 stops, we've seen some 2 stops, we've seen some unfortunate 3 or 4 stops where damage was incurred throughout the race. There was one race where I'm not quite sure who it was, but there was an incident on track. Somebody lost their front wing. They went into the pits. It changed them to hards, but it didn't. Or it changed them to a tire compound, but it didn't fix the front wing. And then they went back in, it fixed the front wing, and then put them out on old tires, and then they had to come back in again to go onto those fresh tires. So we have seen some pretty interesting and unfortunate tire strategies, or pit strategies at least, throughout this series. A little bit of a F1 wiggle, get those tire temps up before coming down this last turn towards that starting grid, and it is soon to all kick off, getting into those positions on the starting grid. Doesn't look like anybody's overshot those positions too much, but here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red lights, and away we go. The final round of Irish Esports Collegiate Winter Series F1. Ella has already picked up a position from Nico off that starting grid. Speeder is into P3 already from P5. Obituary as a second behind, but still holding on to that rest of the pack. We haven't seen too much dispersion just yet, but it will come. We know Speeder is a fan of taking that pole position and going away, increasing that lead from the rest of the pack, sometimes 10 to 15 seconds. Nico going to be making that move around Ella, trying to get that position back on corner 5, but not quite being able to get there. And Speeder's going to take full advantage of that situation appearing in front of him and take that P2 position from Nico. Nico falling back into P3. Ella is sitting comfortably in the lead at the time being, but still has to worry about Speeder now, breathing down their neck, trying to get that P1 position from them. Minikai and Nico here. Minikai is trying to put a move on Nico, trying to get that position. Nico's having to defend while also trying to gain that position back from Speeder. A little bit of a gap appearing between the two of them. Here we sit with Speeder, who is trying to make sure he doesn't leave that DRS zone. That 1 second gap could mean the difference between an overtaking opportunity and a hard push. It looks like Minikai has fallen back quite a bit. 1.5 seconds between themselves and Nico now. Nico's still within that danger zone that Speeder has to worry about them behind them. Obituary has fallen off the pack a little bit, but not to worry. We know what Obituary is capable of throughout these races. Looks like Speeder's going to make a move on Ella on that turn there, going for that pole position. Nico's going to take advantage of that move as well, taking P2. Ella falling back to P3 as well. Now into P4. Minikai taking advantage as well. What is happening? And here we see Speeder trying to increase that gap, but Nico hot on his tails, not giving him the wiggle room he needs to increase that distance between himself and the rest of the group. Looks like a bit of a fierce battle going on for P3 here. Ella has managed to take back that position from Nico. Speeder with a 126. Fastest lap of the race so far. 3 laps in. Potentially eyeing up that extra point for himself like we've seen him do so many times throughout this series. And here we go. Bringing up the gaps there rather than the gap from the leader. And here we see that Ella is trying to close that gap between themselves and Nico. Push, push, push. Trying to get that distance down as much as possible. Stay within that danger DRS zone and make sure that they have that opportunity to make an attack when they feel that the time is right. Speeder has opened up that gap to about 1.2 seconds, so can sit very comfortably. Doesn't have any hot air his car is breathing in, so has the space to kind of push and increase that gap as much as he would like. He would probably want to increase that gap. Has a little bit of a piece of the track there stuck under his wing for a second. Definitely an interesting one. Let's head back to Nico and Ella. Ella is in P2 now. Has managed to take that P2 spot from Nico, but Nico still there, still able to hold on. 0.5 seconds between them, 0.6 seconds, 0.7 seconds between them. The gap is slowly increasing. Ella has managed to open that up just that much. If she can just push that little bit more, get that gap open to 1 second, Nico will no longer be within that DRS activation time window and be able to make that move on Ella. But it's looking like Nico is putting up a fight, trying to keep that gap from opening even more, trying to push and push, put that soft pressure, that soft power on Ella. And that's what it all comes down to. In F1, it comes down to pit strategy and getting inside your opponent's head. Make them feel that pressure, make them feel that soft power, get them to make that mistake so that you can take full advantage of it when it appears. And Speeder is off 2 seconds between himself and P2, is able to take full advantage of the width of the track he has at his disposal to try and increase that gap even more, but still not completely out of danger. 5 laps in, so needs to be on the ball, not make a mistake, because that could end his race. Now, he is our champion this series, this season of F1, so doesn't have to worry about it too much. He's still going to come home with that first place prize at the end of the night, but still he's trying to get that almost victory lap or victory race under his belt. Would be happy to take that home for sure, making him the winner of, I think if I'm not wrong, 7 out of the 8 races throughout this entire championship. So definitely vying for that pole position podium, but doesn't have to worry about losing the championship anymore. And Ella can sit quite comfortably if she can hold on to this P2 position in the overall standings, can sit happily knowing that they will take home that second place prize as well, being able to, quite far ahead of P3 at the moment, which is Freedom, who is not here. So definitely has, you know, it's all up to Nico and Minikai. Who is going to take that P3 position from Speeder in the overall standings? Who's going to take that third place prize? It all comes down to this. As we sit with Nico here, still trying to put that push on, trying to get, well, maybe not trying to push as much, but trying to get those clean laps under their belt. And trying to maybe have to think about Minikai trying to close that gap on them potentially in the next couple laps. If Minikai is able to keep whittling down this gap between themselves, the two of them even, could potentially have an attack on the horizon trying to vie for that P3 position. But the pack has dispersed significantly enough at the time being, so not really much action going to be happening for the minute, but still potentially a mistake could cost somebody a position or two. Minikai with a 3-second penalty. We've known, we love to see it. Well, we hate to see it, but we've known that a time penalty for track infringements was possibly on the horizon for this evening's race. We saw Minikai gain themselves many time penalties for track infringements last race in Qatar. So potentially it was a warning of what was to come, but definitely going to put a damper on their race. No longer 1 second behind Nico, but now 3.5 seconds. Even if they manage to take that position from Nico, going to have to extend their lead by at least 3 seconds to be in the clear if they were to finish in P3 to stick that position in the final standings of this race. But definitely something they have to worry about now. Unless Nico manages to pick up a 3-second time penalty for themselves, which would negate both penalties, being that they are currently P3 and P4, unless one of them makes a mistake. But not looking likely at the moment. But that being said, the commentator's curse has been known to rear its ugly head when I say things like that. Caution on Sector 3. Speeder has dropped a position to Ella, being so focused on talking about Minikai and Nico that Ella has taken that position from Speeder. And we have potentially another attack from Speeder on our hands, trying to close that gap. It was 0.4 seconds, now it's 0.1. Ella feeling the pressure of Speeder breathing down their neck. Speeder's going to make a move to take that position. Going to take it, but can they hold on to it coming out the other end of turn 5? Going wide, very wide on that turn 5. But going to take that position and hold on to it for the time being. But Ella is within that DRS danger zone. Going to potentially be able to put an attack going down into this turn, but nothing comes of it. Going to try and stay on Speeder's bumper there. Keep that gap from opening up anymore. What will Ella make of this situation? Can they find a response in their tool belt, as we have seen Ella do so many times before? We've seen Ella come back from situations like this, but looking like Speeder's going to open that gap up to 0.4 seconds. Still has that threat to worry about, but is looking like he's opening up that gap very comfortably for the time being. Going to be wanting to take that gap up to that 1 second mark. Make sure that Ella does not have DRS going down this straight here. There is no DRS on this straight, apologies, but there will be soon after turn 5. Here we see a performance tire check of between Ella and Nico, was that? Interesting that the game brought that up, but anyway, this track is very heavy on the right side tires of your car. There's a lot of those left-hand turns which will put that pressure on the right side of your car. So I'm going to be having to think about that. Ella looking like they had, you know, pretty good on the left side, but wearing down that right side, like I said, pretty consistently. But tire strategy definitely going to be coming into play coming into this 9th lap. Or coming into the 10th lap even. They all have 8 laps under their belts on those mediums. Who's going to pit first? How is that going to affect their race? Now, we have seen from these racers that on those mediums, when they're not, you know, full out pushing for those positions, pushing to regain that time between themselves and the driver ahead, that they last about 12 to 14 laps on those mediums. So coming towards lap 10 now, going to be starting to think about who's going to come into the pits and what tire they're going to go for. Are they going to go for hards, try and go for a one-stop, or are they going to go for softs, trying to increase those gaps between themselves and drivers behind them? Going to be interesting to see what comes of it for sure. Apologies, viewers. Just to let you know, anytime there's a long gap of silence there, it is me taking a drink of water because, well, usually I would have somebody sitting here with me that would take over, but because it's just me today, you might have to be subjected to a little bit of silence here and there where I'll take a sup of water to try and, you know, keep my throat from drying out, as this type of work tends to do. But here we have Ella still pushing for that position, but falling back a little bit. Speeder able to increase that gap, but Ella flitting in between that 1 second and 0.9 seconds. So still trying to stay on their tail. Let's move on down the grid to Nico and Minikai for the time being, as that kind of battle for P1 has dissipated just a little bit. Now, Nico is 8 seconds behind P2 currently, but has that space to really use the most of the track to their advantage, you know, get those clean lap times under their belt, not having to worry too much about Minikai currently, who is 2.3 seconds behind, and on top of that, has that 3-second time penalty to worry about. So Nico can really just focus on getting those clean laps, getting those laps under their belt. A little bit slidey coming out of that corner. Those are those slippy curbs I was talking about at the start of the stream. But definitely has kind of that time, has that space, has that clean air to really put those lap times down and really get them under their belt. Minikai looking like they're decreasing that gap just a little bit, just a hair, throughout those last couple of turns there. Now increasing just a little bit more, but definitely was whittling down that gap between themselves and Nico, but still has that 3-second time penalty for track infringements to worry about. Nobody is pitting just yet. Oh, here we go. A tire performance comparison between Nico and Minikai. Looking like Minikai's very hard on that rear right tire compared to Nico. So definitely having to worry about that. Potentially could play into the pit strategy. Thank you, F124, for bringing up that amazing comparison for me. Almost like it was listening. And let's, while this situation develops a little bit more, Minikai being able to close that gap and then losing it a little bit throughout some of these more, slower turns, not being able to get them quite as fast. Ideally trying not to break any more track infringements potentially, but let's move on over to Obituary Baton, who arguably is, somebody who doesn't see a lot of on-screen time due to the fact that towards the end of most races has had the unfortunate being of being the last in the pack. As we see that, Ella getting a track infringement penalty of 3 seconds, bringing that time down to 5 seconds behind Speeder, but both in the pits. Everybody's in the pits now. Looking like Speeder and Ella going for that one-stop strategy. Obituary's going to take advantage of this, going to go for another lap, try and gain those positions, but will have to fall back into the pits pretty soon to change over. But like I was saying, Obituary has had that kind of commitment to the sportsmanship of, might be in a worse off position than they would have liked to be at the end of a race, but still battling it out to the very bitter end. And that is what we love to see here. It is that sportsmanship. It is that commitment to finishing a race, and very commendable, because we've all seen it that, somebody's coming last and they're not having fun, and, they'll be a little bit of a disruption to the rest of the race, or they'll just retire entirely and opt out of finishing the race, in which case they get no points. But so very commendable to Obituary for sticking it out, even though they have finished in last position for most of these races, but now is sitting in P3, but potentially thinking about coming into the pits, potentially thinking about extending that gap between themselves and Minikai. Looking like everybody's going for that one-stop hards strategy. 14 laps in, here we sit with Speeder, who is still in P1. It looked like coming out of that pit lane, Ella managed to take that position. Obituary in the pits! Ella managing to take that position back for a brief moment, but nothing came of it. Speeder managing to take it back, and that 3-second time penalty going to put a damper on Ella's spirits. Going to be another thing to worry about. Looks like Ella in the background knocking down that DRS zone sign as well. So, interesting tactic, but currently sitting 8 seconds behind Speeder with that time penalty added on. Minikai 11 seconds, 13 seconds behind Ella with that time penalty added on as well. Nico 2 seconds behind Minikai. Minikai just managing to get out of the pits that little much quicker than Nico, managing to gain that position over them, and going to be wanting to hold on to it, try and extend that lead to at least 3 seconds, 4 seconds if they can. But Nico is a formidable force, an amazing driver. We have seen time and time again, week in, week out throughout this series, has managed to gain those positions when they need to, and will be looking to close that gap, potentially try and take that position, but knowing if they finish within 3 seconds of Minikai, will be taking that P3 position no matter what, and getting their points that they want in the overall standings at the end of this series. It will, obviously, being the final round, will be the final deciding race of second place and third place. Those all-important prize positions. That being said, if you didn't come first, second, or third, of course, it's all about taking part, enjoying taking part as well, and having a bit of fun while you're doing it, having that sportsmanship between yourself and the other drivers. We have, of course, the Discord, which you can, join, and the drivers chat is always popping off before stream commences, before the race begins. Everybody comparing their practice lap times, having a bit of banter, having a bit of crack in the chat before the race begins. And then even after the race ends, there's always a bit of chatter going on. Nico closing down that gap between themselves and Minikai. down from 2 seconds to 0.9 seconds, really putting the push on those hard. Speeder with a 125 fastest lap. And here we are, potentially, oh, there it is. I didn't even get to say it. Overtake from Nico, taking that position from Minikai. That attack had been mounting for some time, was managing to whittle away that time gap between themselves. Now going to be wanting to open it up even more, even though Minikai still has that 3-second time penalty to worry about. Is probably hoping that Nico will pick one up as well, but if Nico could open that gap up just that little bit more, won't have to worry about defending as much, and potentially could get off scot-free. Whereas when having that pressure of Minikai bearing down on them, breathing down their neck, putting that soft pressure on them, going to be making a lot more mistakes, potentially incurring a 3-second time penalty, which will negate, and the race, well, the battle for P3 would be back on. But looking like Nico is going to try and increase that time gap. Minikai holding on strong, still trying to put that pressure on Nico, try and make them make a mistake, but looking like Nico is clear-minded, clear-headed, trying to just get around these turns as cleanly as possible. And coming down this last turn 16 towards that finish line, 4 laps under their belts on these hards. Not having to worry about tires too much for the next little while, but potentially if somebody's pushing too hard on those tires, very heavy on the braking, could have a negative effect. Looking like Nico's going to pull away that little bit more from Minikai, but Minikai still pushing to get that position from Nico. Closing that gap up just that little bit much, taking about 0.3 seconds off that time gap coming into turn. I have no idea anymore. Coming into turn 6 and 7, apologies. I lost track there. I do have the map up beside me, but it, gets confusing sometimes when you're trying to focus on talking about who is where. Minikai is breaking down that distance between themselves and Nico, trying to potentially put an attack on Nico, take that P3 position from them, but Nico, every time Minikai manages to gain that little bit more space between them, Nico is able to just open it up that much more. A beautiful sweeping shot there of the irrelevant to the race, but just thought I'd point that out. Coming into turn 1, we didn't see too much action on turn 1. We saw Speeder gain about 2 places, but not as much as I had thought. There wasn't much jumping and jostling on that turn 1 on lap 1. 18 laps, 11 laps to go. Looking like everybody's going for that one-stop pit stop strategy. Definitely been quite a bit of action this evening, despite only having 5 racers. But what is to come? Nico has managed to open the gap between themselves and Minikai. Minikai, again, still having to worry about that 3-second time penalty, but yeah, Nico has managed to pull away, and potentially Minikai is dropping back at that little bit more to regain that battery power, try and kind of push without wasting too much of that battery reserve, and regain that time so that they have what they need in the tank to take that position and hold off Nico from taking it back. And coming down this straight, let's move on over to... let's talk about Speeder for a little bit. Now, Speeder has been a dominant force. That being said, Obituary gaining themselves a 3-second time penalty for track infringements. Not going to affect the race too much at the current time, the current standings as they are, with 10 laps to go, 24 seconds behind. But Speeder has been a very formidable opponent for the rest of the grid throughout this championship. He has shown us time and time again, week in, week out, that he has what it takes to be champion. Now, we had seen earlier on in the championship that almost rivalry, on-track rivalry between himself and Freedom, but Freedom not being able to appear out on the latter half of these races as much has meant that Speeder was able to kind of gain that advantage over Freedom. There was at one point a battle for P1 even, not P2, P1 even, in the overall standings around, I want to say, race 4, race 5. Oh, a little bit squirrely coming out of that corner from Speeder. And then Freedom was unable to make 2 of the races, which made it possible for Speeder to grow that advantage and really secure that position of pole, of overall champion. So he's very content coming through these final 9 laps in the final race of the final week of the Irish Esports Collegiate Winter Series, knowing that he has taken home that prize for himself. And while they might not be out on track this evening, again, want to talk about Freedom. Freedom, again, was on-track rivals with Speeder, was able to take those positions from him, give him a run for his money, and had managed to win our first race in Bahrain, taking it away from Speeder as well. Having those battles on track were amazing to watch. And of course, how could we forget about, well, we haven't forgot about them, but how could we not talk about Chris Chico as well? Another racer that had given Speeder a run for their money in the absence of Freedom as well. There was at one point, a couple of races ago, a 3-way battle for P1 between Speeder, Freedom, and Chris. And Chris, again, was a very formidable force, going toe-to-toe with Freedom and Speeder. And a couple of people that we hadn't seen on track throughout this championship at all, so can't really comment on them. But looks like Ella has gone into the pits to swap onto those mediums, potentially give themselves that little bit of a tire grip advantage. Also a faster tire than the hards, potentially was wearing them down a little bit too much, although having that clean air and that space the whole width of the track to work with, get those laps under their belt, potentially could be trying to get that fastest lap away from Speeder, get that extra point. Let's see who has the fastest lap. Yeah, Speeder has the fastest lap currently with a 125.5, still sitting on that from a couple laps ago. And looks like Ella might be wanting to take that extra point away from Speeder, as he's been a real, he's really hogged the points for fastest lap throughout this championship. I'm pretty sure he's gotten most of them. There has been the off race where he hasn't gotten the extra point for fastest lap, but for the most part has managed to secure that extra point, and coming in first place, netting him those 26 points, which has put him in the position he is in today. But Ella now having 3-second time penalty, 5 seconds between themselves and Minikai, despite being on those mediums compared to everybody else on those worn hards, has a lot of work cut out for them to take back those positions in just 7 laps. It is doable, but still a lot of work ahead of themselves. Potentially not the smartest pit maneuver or pit strategy move, but I guess time will tell. Is managing to whittle down that time very fast though. was at 5.6 seconds just a minute ago. Now at 4.4, managing to gain that time on Minikai, putting the hunt on them, really hunting them down, trying to take that P3 position, secure those extra points for themselves that they would not get if they finished P4. That's it with Minikai. Has managed to keep themselves within that kind of 2-3 second gap between themselves and Nico, so has done a very good job at not letting Nico get too much of a lead on them, but still, again, talking about that 3-second penalty, having to worry about it for the time being. Ella there with the 125.142. Like I said, going for that fastest lap, extra point, taking that away from Speeder. Potentially, Speeder potentially has time to go for a pit stop here with 28 seconds between himself and Nico. Could possibly come out on those softs in the last couple of laps here, but we have seen Speeder do that, but potentially not the right move at the moment. You know, would probably want to increase that 27-second gap a little bit more before taking that risky move. But Ella here closing down the gap between themselves and Minikai, trying to take that position back from them. Of course, that 3-second time penalty negating each other, canceling each other out. They both have 3-second time penalties, so no matter who finishes where, it all comes down to who's actually in front when they cross that finish line. There we go. Speeder's gone into the pits. Change those softs. Change those hards for softs. Try and get back that fastest lap point for himself. And looking like Nico is potentially going to take that. Oh. Almost take that position from Speeder, but still 7 seconds between them. So I'm completely wrong in what I'm saying. 7 seconds between Speeder and Nico. Went into that pit stop, came out with 7 seconds to spare. So Speeder definitely going for that fastest lap. We'll have to check back with him in just a second. Moving back to Ella and Minikai. Ella has whittled down that gap yet again between herself and Minikai. 0.6 of a second separates them now within that DRS danger time frame. Potentially a move on the horizon for Ella to take that position. P3 from Minikai. Minikai going to be holding on for dear life, defending that position as much as possible. Ella's going to make the move down the outside. Going to take that going into turn 9. And going to take that position and try and open that gap up from themselves and Minikai. Minikai going to be trying to hold on to that as much as possible, chasing Ella down into these last couple of corners, coming up to turn 14. Here we go, turn 15. Ella has managed to open that gap up to 0.7 of a second now. Those mediums are coming out as the best play for Ella. 1 second between them now. That gap is just growing and growing. And Minikai can't really do much to catch up at this moment in time. On those hards, 12 laps under their belt. Not really much they can do about Ella taking that position from them with those mediums. 4 laps under their belt. Ella is off in the distance, catching up to Nico as well. 3 seconds between them, bearing in mind that 3-second penalty will come into effect as well. So about 6 seconds behind Nico, but still pushing in these final 4 laps to try and whittle that time gap down, try and take that position from Nico. Potentially could be a better move to just increase that gap between themselves and Minikai and just sit in P3 until the end of the race. But Minikai not making it easy for Ella to pull away just yet. That gap opening up, but Ella or Minikai able to close it down, coming into some of these corners. Speeder with a 124.362, taking that extra point for himself once again. on those softs. Gonna be hard for somebody else to beat that time now. Coming into these final 3 laps of the race. Speeder's gonna be happy with that extra point. He's gonna be happy with those 26 points adding on to his current total in the championship, with the championship title under his belt as well. It's just a victory lap for him now. Obituary there with another 3-second time penalty. Gonna be putting a bit of a damper on his spirits coming into these final few laps. 33 seconds down, 39 seconds even. 39 seconds with those additional time penalties. But like we said, Obituary fights it out to the bitter end, securing those points for himself, even if they're not the most amazing points, even if it's not the most amazing position to be in at the end of the race, but still fighting till the bitter end, trying to show that sportsmanship of it's not all about winning all the time. It's about securing those consistent points, getting those laps under your belt, getting those consistent positions as well. And Ella has now managed to close down that gap between themselves and Nico quite substantially. Minikai with a 3-second time penalty. Oh no! It's another 3-second time penalty for Minikai. They are now 6 seconds behind. 6 seconds behind. Apologies. Speeder's gone into the pits. Again. He's gone into the pits again, changing to another set of softs. What is he doing? Like I was saying, Minikai had managed to secure themselves another 3-second time penalty, adding on to that 3-second gap. It was 3 seconds. Now it's gone down a little bit to 1.9 seconds behind Speeder. I'm so confused about that strategy from Speeder. 2 laps left in this race and deciding to pit once again onto those fresh softs, but definitely going to have that tire compound to work with. Those soft, fast tires. Everybody else's tires are very worn by this point. Nico is now into P1 on those hards. 14 laps on them. Ella in P2. 1.4 seconds. Add on that 3-second time penalty. 4.3 seconds. And 6 laps on those mediums. But Speeder is catching quickly. Let's sit with him for a second. He is catching up very quickly. He has opened that gap up massively between himself and Minikai in just that Sector 3. End of Sector 2, the whole of Sector 3 has managed to open up that gap. We saw it was like 0.9 seconds. He's now opened it up by 3 seconds. This is insane. Potentially, this crazy pit strategy has worked in his favor. He's managed to close that gap between himself and Ella very rapidly, but rapidly approaching on the back of Nico there is Ella, closing that gap between themselves to 0.2 of a seconds, potentially going to make a move on Nico in these final couple of corners. Getting very close. Nico having to fight for their life. Fight for those points in pole position. Speeder is coming up the rear as well. Ella going to make a move for that position. Going to take it. Nico not being able to respond just at the moment. Potentially going to make another move, but having to worry about battling off Speeder as well. Speeder closing down that gap. 0.5 of a second. Closing in on Nico now. Nico is caught in the middle, potentially going to cause some slowdown for Speeder. Speeder having to fight off Nico. Going to make that move though. Not quite having the speed to overtake Nico just yet. Coming down the straight. That being said, Speeder's going to take that position. Nico's not going to be able to respond as much with 16 laps on those hards. 2 laps on those softs for Speeder. Going to be closing down that gap between himself and Ella. Trying to push for that trying to push on the last lap to take that pole position. Is Ella going to be able to hold him off? But having to worry about that 3-second time penalty, it doesn't really matter anymore. If Speeder manages to take P2, Ella's still going to lose to Speeder in this race overall. Speeder taking that position from Ella. not much Ella can do. She's stuck in P2 for the time being. Nico is taking full advantage of this situation unfolding. A little bit of contact there on that corner. Nico potentially dropping off a little bit now. 0.6 seconds between, 0.5 seconds even between Ella and Speeder. 0.7 seconds between Ella and Nico. It's just all ramping up in the final lap. Ella's going to have to be very concerned about that 3-second time penalty they incurred earlier on in the race. Even if they gain this P2 finish, they're going to have to drop down to P3 because of that penalty, and Nico will take that P2. There's not really enough time for Ella to open up that gap to at least 3 seconds between them. Coming into this final corner, Speeder is going to cross the line in first position. Ella's going to take second, but will drop back down to third. Nico's going to be bumped up into second. Minikai will take P4, and Obituary is going to come in P5. And that is it, folks. That is the championship. Speeder is your champion. He won a couple of races ago. This was just a victory lap for him. A couple of interesting techniques in this pit strategy. Ella will be taking the P2 potentially. I'm looking at the standings here. It's looking like Ella's going to take P2 in the championship, and Nico potentially is going to overtake Minikai in the overall standings as well. What an exciting race towards the end. The final lap everything comes down to the wire because of Speeder's decision to go for those softs right at the end. The last couple of laps, he did it twice. He got that extra point for himself, and then he got that extra, boost of confidence almost to close down that gap and take that P1 position from the rest of the grid. And there you have it, your champion. That was very exciting, actually, towards the end. We had seen so much variety of driving styles today. We had seen Speeder going for that back row qualifying position, working his way up the grid. We had seen the pack disperse quite significantly, and we had seen that kind of battle towards the end. That was incredible. That was definitely a race that will go down in history, at least collegiate series history, for a very exciting race towards the end there. But of course, thank you so much for joining us. Again, a big shout out to all of our sponsors: Reraw, Dogpatch Labs, Coca, Stacks, Play A, GG Machines. Of course, we are Irish Esports Collegiate Series, powered by Nativz. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you will enjoy the grand finals at LAN tomorrow if you are going. Of course, if you are not, you can still watch it over here on Twitch as well. But we definitely had a show for you this evening. And of course, I hope to see you all in F1 in the new series in spring. So, of course, thank you for joining me. I've been Gib, and I hope you enjoyed the F1 this evening. I'm going to close this out, and yeah, thank you for watching. This has been a really good championship towards the end.